Guys, I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. She came all the way from England. She played 4 years at Tennessee Tech. Were you an All-American? Let's just say she was an All-American caliber player. She sure was good. Okay. She's the owner of Spherical Yellow. And you can find her on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere. I would like to present to you Margot Carter.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. Can you just like come around with me on a regular basis and like introduce me? I want to thank you all for letting me be up here and talking to you, because when I signed up for this, I sort of thought that I was going to be talking to people younger than me that had maybe less experience, and it seems like you all know a lot more about the tennis industry than I do. So feel free to tell me if I'm not making any sense, or if I've said something that you disagree with, because actually that's the way I preface all of my lessons. I talk to people and I say, you know what, it doesn't matter how old you are, how much you know, how much you don't know. If we're not understanding each other, we've got a problem. So may as well apply that here as well, because I'm kind of treating this like I'm on a tennis court. I'm on a pretend tennis court. So I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about the stuff that I've learned over the years that I'm using at the moment in my life that's important to me. But to explain, for it all to make sense, I sort of have to give you a little bit of a background, how I got to where I am today, which is kind of a little bit of a story. So as you can all see from your little handouts, there's a nice little picture of me when I was cute and innocent and stuff. And so that's where it all started at the age of about 5. And in my hands there I have, sorry to the head guy, I don't know where he's gone, a Donné racket. And I was running around the house telling my mother, we've got to keep this racket, because one day when I win Wimbledon, I want to bring this racket out on the court with me, and I want to say, this is my first tennis racket. And, you know, for a 5-year-old at the time, I think my parents probably thought I was a bit crazy, but they went with the flow because I had so much energy. They had to do something with me. And so if we sort of fast forward to when I was 18, I think I had realized at this point that perhaps winning Wimbledon might be a little bit out of my range. But I hadn't given up hope of playing professional tennis. And I had these dreams to be inside the top 100. So I still hadn't, you know, given up on the professional tennis. And so I came out here, I got my 4 years at Tennessee Tech, I had a phenomenal time. I then played on the professional circuit for a couple of years, and I got it to 451 at one point in the doubles world rankings. And then of course ran out of money, and that's a whole nother story. I'm not here to talk about my professional career, but as you all know, there's not much prize money in that. So back to college I go. I get a master's in environmental biology. I had a graduate assistantship, so I was coaching at Tennessee Tech. And my mother said to me, right, you've got a master's in biology now. Are you going to be a scientist? I was like, yes, that's it. I'm going to be a scientist. And I don't know if any of you remember 2011 and the job market, but it wasn't much fun. Here I am, 6 years of school under my belt, a master's in biology, and all I'm getting is interviews. And then they're like, well, you have no experience. I was like, but do you not see what I did athletically? Everyone said, you know, be a student athlete and you'll get jobs because it shows that you have like great determination and you know how to work hard. Well, I tell you what, in 2011 it didn't work. It didn't work much in 2012 either. And so I'm over here and I'm getting these interviews, and I bump into Bill Riddle, who's not listening. Where did he go? How dare he leave the room? And Bill says to me, help, boot camp, here, ladies boot camp, I need an extra coach. So I'm like, okay, well I need some cash, so this will be fine. So a week of boot camp rolls through, and then he goes, help, boot camp next week. So I'm like, all right, here we go, boot camp. And then he says to me, what are you doing in April? Well, this is like the 24th of March. I said, well, you know, job hunting. He said, do you want to go to the Caribbean for a month? And I thought, oh yeah, why not? I said, you do realise April starts next week? He said, yeah, don't worry, we'll take care of that. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. And the next thing I know, I'm on a beach in the Caribbean for a month, and I had a phenomenal time. And I came back to Tennessee after having had that great time, and I was lucky enough to get a job assistant coach at a country club here in town, and still interviews, seriously looking to be, I was looking at all these engineering firms, I was going to save the world, one river at a time. I still haven't given up on that dream, but in the meantime, I was talking to some of the members, and they were saying, Margot, when you're talking about tennis, you're so animated, the energy just comes off you. And when you talk about biology, you sort of go a little bit two-dimensional. And they sort of said, are you sure you want to be a scientist? And I honestly had a moment where I thought, well, I've got 6 years of school. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do now? And over the course of the next month or so, this reality check kicked in at how so many people in the same position as me would be broke. They wouldn't have had the tennis to fall back on. Everyone said, go and get school because tennis won't last forever. And for me, tennis saved me in the recession when I couldn't find a job. I mean, granted, I probably could have gone and worked as a bartender or whatever, but like serious career-wise, I couldn't get my foot in the door. And so I started to look back on my life and how amazing it's been because of tennis. Tennis gave me, I mean, granted, I had to work for it. I hate using the word free ride, but tennis gave me 6 years of education. It gave me traveling around the world playing pro, and then it gave me that stint in the Caribbean, and then it gave me a job when I didn't have anything else. And it just suddenly became this like vocational thing within me to give back to the sport that's given me so much. If it wasn't for my love of tennis, I would have really struggled through certain times of my life, and I wouldn't have had what I have today. So then I have sort of a couple of years of teaching, kind of easy, not really thinking about much, and my visa expired. So I had to figure out how to get back to this country because, you know, there's a reason I left the UK. It's not a great sporting country. They're not very good at supporting their athletes, and at the end of the day, it's sort of a hobby. You know, we don't have college sports, and it's just a completely different attitude. So I really wanted to get back to the USA, and the only way for me to get back here was to actually start my own business. And so last year, while I went back on tour for fun a little bit, but that's another story, I created this business. And this business is twofold, and it consists of tennis coaching on the one hand, where I go to places that don't have programming and start to create programming for them. And on the other hand, I also have an iPhone app, which is kind of fun. It's not very well developed yet because those things are really expensive. But it was fun to take an idea and turn it into a tangible item that people can download on their phones and use. And what I realized as a result of all of this is that once you've got your own company and your own business, every idea that you have suddenly becomes, how can I make this a business idea? How can I turn this into something that's going to create something else? So I started kind of walking around with a completely different attitude. It's really fun. Had a little pep in my step, like, yeah, I own my own business. So, you know, it's actually not, it's got a lot of negatives to it as well, and it's very scary, but it's a completely different change in my brain, which is kind of cool. So over the course of my life, and then the course of this year, I've learned quite a few things, and some of them I'm only realizing I learned them now, even though they're lessons from when I was very young. And some of the things I've just learned in the last year or so. And that's kind of what I would like to share with you a little bit today. So, so I'm with my dad sitting around the dining room table, and I'm thinking, what am I going to call this business? I couldn't think of a good name. And I said, I've had enough. I'm going to call it Yellow Balls and be done with it. And my dad laughed, and in his oh so eloquent manner, he said, what about spherical yellow? Now, I know you've got a piece of paper there, so you've seen the name and everything, but did you hear that correctly? You know, do you need me to repeat that? Spherical yellow? Do you understand what I'm saying? I tell you what, when you're on a phone that's slightly crackly to tech support in India to try to rebuild your website, it's an absolute nightmare, because those people don't know how to spell spherical. They don't understand the way I pronounced it. There was a crackle in the middle of yellow, and maybe it was yeller. And it's an absolute nightmare. So while I think it's a great name, and I love the brand that I've created with it, even though it's nothing very glamorous yet, if you ever start your own business, I would like you to think about all the different ways that that name will be used. Even if I just tell you the number of times that I've had to go back to someone with a check and say, no, spherical isn't S-F-E. No, spherical isn't S-H-P-H. The number of different spellings I've had of spherical is unbelievable. So that was kind of one of my first lessons. Was as much as I thought it was a cool name, it may not be the best one out there, although now I'm stuck with it. So I'm sure you all have some sort of experience like that. I mean, actually, I should have thought about it first anyway. My name's Margot and there's a T on the end, and that's French, which is great, but Americans don't know about the T on the end of Margot half the time, so that gets forgotten. I'm sure you all have some experiences like that you can tap into. So yeah, that's kind of like lesson number 1 from this year. And then I think if maybe I can throw out a little question out there. So, you know, how many of you, and I think you probably all have done this, you've all probably started a tennis lesson with a plan. And your plan has been to work on this, 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 and this. And then after about 2 minutes, you look at whatever it is that needs fixing, some of the stuff we looked at today already, and you've gone, right, never mind, plan out the window because we really need to fix this before we move on to something else. Yes, I'm seeing some nods over here. So you've all had that. And I think something that I've really learned this year is that this skill that we all have of adaptability is something that we can apply in all aspects of life. So while earlier I was talking about how I was trying to be a scientist and I basically ditched that to continue where the energy goes, I think if I've learned anything through the business side of things, is to use that same skill and apply it to what you're trying to do with your business. Because when I started out, I had to give this amazingly detailed business plan to immigration, which, and that, again, a whole nother story. Really don't want to go down that one right now, but they needed a lot of detail. And they looked over it with me, and basically, I'm not using that business plan anymore. My plan has completely changed, and that was only a year, it was exactly a year ago I put forward that plan to them. And it's adapted probably 15 times since then, with what I thought was going to be my major source of income, how I thought I was going to do things, to the reality of what I'm doing today. So, and I think adaptability, I mean, it's a skill we all have, but I think sometimes people don't realize they have certain skills, and they don't always know to apply them to other areas of life. So, I guess I'm quite pleased that I already had that skill, but I'm also quite pleased that I'm tapping into it at the moment. So that's been kind of a reality check for me, but at the same time, I think we've all had that. And I think that, you know, something that my dad said to me, actually I was telling him what I was going to talk about today, and when I came to this section, he used to be in the army, and he threw out a quote, which I will share with you because I actually really like it, because the moment he said it, I thought, oh good, even the army agrees with me. And that he was always taught that a military battle plan is only good until the first shot is fired. And I found myself thinking, really? Like, even as soon as the first shot is fired, they throw that plan out the window? And I mean, that's a quote that they use in the army. So, and I thought, well, if the military agrees with me, then I'm probably doing something right anyway. So I think that's a useful skill that we've all got. And so perhaps I'd like to ask a question here. And I think we've probably all had some kind of negative experience with a tennis coach, somewhere along the lines. Does anyone have any sort of maybe keywords or phrases or buzzwords that you can associate with a negative coaching experience that you'd like to share? There's got to be some. You kind of all had glorified careers the whole way through the age of 6 up to now.
What the hell was that? That was said quite often.
Oh, really?
Punitive.
Nice. That's rough. Anyone else?
Punitive.
Yeah?
Too much details.
Too much details.
Gets at one point monotonous.
Monotonous, that's a good one. Yes, I hadn't even thought about that, but I've had that one too. Yeah. And I think that, so I'm going to share a small story, but actually the monotonous one's really good. What makes you say that, actually? What was...
Basically, at one point in my junior tennis career, I didn't travel all that much, but I had a coach, and looking back on it, he was great. But there were times when I wanted to go somewhere else to another coach, because not every lesson was the same, but they were all very structured, very similar. In a way where I was like, hey, this is getting kind of old. I want to work on this and this, and as a kid. You still bring stuff up, but the coach should be like, okay, well, look, I see what you're doing. All right, let's work on this particular aspect rather than let's do the same thing.
Mm.
So
yeah.
When I became a coach, I was like, I'm not doing the same thing.
Right, and that's the thing. Like I think we've all had. Well, I've definitely had a lot of negative experiences. I think the biggest one that stands out for me is when I was about 16 or 17. I had a coach. I had to come from the other side of town to get to my tennis lesson, so I was always 3 or 4 minutes late. And my mother would always come pick me up, and I just can visualize coming off the tennis court, and my mother just looking at her watch. You still have 5 minutes. You've already picked up the balls, and you're coming off the court. And I was like, I don't know. The coach tells me what to do. I do what the coach says, And I think I didn't like that that's the way my mother was feeling, actually. I was just doing what the coach said, so now, as a coach, I'm very aware of what the parents are seeing, because I think back to the way my mother was feeling, and I think, well, I don't want those parents who I know are paying for me to be with their kid to be thinking, well, that, if you add that up, that 5 minutes, what's that? It's a good $3 or $4 anyway. And if you start adding up all of those breaks and everything, I know that there are parents out there that are seeing that. And so I really thought, it falls back on that negative experience has taught us how we don't want to be to our students. And something else that this coach did, I remember saying, my volleys are not good enough, we need to fix them. And he's like, no, they're fine. I had friends tell me I looked like I was trimming hedges. And I was like, but I've asked my coach to fix them and he says they're fine. So, that was kind of frustrating. And then the other thing that he did was that he was never really there for me. It depends on what kind of relationship you've got with your clients. But for me, I was a 17-year-old, I was playing all the national tournaments in England, I was looking for my scholarship over here. I wasn't just some hit and giggle kid. And I wanted to call him at the end of my match and say, I want to debrief, I want to talk about it, I want to know, and he just would he would give me 30 seconds of his time. And I just, at the time, I was all consumed in sort of my own tennis career and how, and that was almost a time when I don't think I ever really thought about giving up, but I was definitely not happy at that point. And it's like all of these different experiences rolled into the fact that now I don't want to be that coach. I don't want to be that guy that's always finishing 5 minutes early. I don't want to be the one. So I tell all of my kids, when you come to me, yes, you're paying for your 1 hour tennis lesson, but you're kind of joining a club. You're joining the Margot club. And it means that if you want to call me, call me. If you want to know what kind of tennis racket you need, if you want anything, and I tell them that. And I found that by telling them that, they love it. They don't tap into it very often. I don't usually get phone calls asking about rackets and shoes and whatnot. But they love knowing that option's there. Because there are so many coaches out there, and I don't think anyone here is actually going to fall under this category, because we all care. We're all here trying to get better. There's so many coaches out there that don't really care, and they don't feel comfortable calling. So that's sort of my biggest negative experience that I'm trying to turn into a positive now. And I think your monotonous thing, that's good, because I also recall having a coach that every single clinic was identical. And going home to my mum and being like, I know exactly what we're going to do, I'm so bored of this. And so that's a very useful thing to have learned as well. And what did you say again?
What the hell was that?
That's horrible.
That's my drop shot from the back of the fence. That's what it is.
That's a terrible, that's not a very good way to motivate a kid though, is it?
No, not really. But you know, looking back on it, I understand the reasoning behind it. I mean, I was pretty creative, but you know, creativity doesn't win matches.
I mean, were you like 12 or you were like 17? You knew better.
Last year.
Yeah, last year.
That's a little bit too. It's like,
I was fairly young, but at the time, I mean, I was a baseball player. You know, when you're young and you play 2 sports, I was like, I'm fine. I'm gonna pitch for the Yankees anyway, so this is just whatever. And then I turned into a tennis player, not a baseball player. But it wasn't like that on the baseball field. I mean, I did everything by the book, but tennis for me was kind of like an outlet, you know, to get away. So I saw what I saw on TV, or I saw what the other pros were trying to do, and I tried to mimic it. And whether that was a drop shot or trying to slide on clay and falling, you know, I was a little wild out there. But I enjoyed hitting from no man's land and doing that kind of stuff. But I understand what the coaching was for. I think it was more, he looked rough, but I think on the inside he was just kind of, he knew what was going to happen. So.
But I've got this one kid who's actually quite decent, as a 9-year-old, and he's like really wants to start hitting slice backhands, and I'm like, you know, can we just sort out your normal backhand for a minute? But actually, why stop him? Let him do a few every time, because then he gets rid of his outlet for wanting to do it, and then we can focus on what he needs to do. And so, I don't know, every now and then if you're doing something a little bit silly, you're still holding onto a tennis racket, you're still getting a feel for it and everything, so, I don't know.
I've done a few group drills on tweeners, just because they want to.
Yeah.
You know, like instead of playing it like before.
I need to join in that.
Yeah,
I've only ever
Like, let's take 5 minutes and work on tweeners real quick, guys. That'll be fun.
I've only tried that shot twice, and both times I fell flat on my face.
I don't do it personally.
Like I want to jump into it, and I do kind of roly-poly, and I fall over. It's terrible.
Why wasn't that a fix it for him?
What's wrong?
We need to do that one later. That'll be good.
That's fine,
So I have, I think everyone's probably been told at some point, somewhere along the line, how important it is to appreciate what people do for you. And I think that I'm sure we've all heard this, but because this story is really important to me and it is connected to tennis, I'm going to share it with you. So my mother always said to me, actually I suppose I should pause there and say that practically everything I've learned in life has been on the tennis court anyway. We can all say it's connected. But anyway, so after every single tournament, my mother would say to me, you must go and thank the tournament director. It's very important. But that one was kind of rubbish and his scheduling was terrible. Margot? Yes, mother. Okay, so off I would go and thank the tournament director. I did this my whole junior career, and this bled over into college tennis. So 2003, 2004, I was playing some college tournaments, and obviously went up to the director at the end and the assistants and said, thank you so much for organising this, you know, because I was sort of supposed to, because my mother said I should. And I had never fully appreciated what that meant to the tournament directors until this particular moment. So we're now fast forward to 2013, and I'm sitting at the country club here in Nashville, and this chap walks in. He's promoting the Music City Tennis Invitational, and he's got some flyers, and he goes up to the front desk and he says, you know, can we promote this, that and the other? And I'm like, I know that guy. Where do I know that guy from? Who is that guy? And after a few minutes I couldn't take it anymore, and I went up to him and I said, hey, I don't know why, but I know you. And he looked at me and said, yes, you look familiar. And he said, I used to coach this, that and the other. And I said, yes, that's right, we used to play in your tournament. I played at Tennessee Tech. And he said, you're the girl that said thank you. Whoa. I mean, this is 10 years later, and he remembers that. And I said that to him. I said, you remember that? And he said, you have any idea how many people come up to me when I'm running a tournament and they say, I need better balls, I need more donuts, I need more water, I want. And you came up to me and you said hi, and I went, ugh, and you said thank you. You said, of course I remember that, that's huge. Now that on its own is already quite a good story. But the reason why that story is so important to me is that as a result of that, this chap has turned into one of my most important friends here in Nashville, and he invited me into his group of friends, because at the point I didn't have any in Nashville, because I was from Cookville and been travelling all over the world. And so those 3 thank yous from 2003 and 2004 have resulted in my core group of friends here in this town that I spend a lot of weekends with. And for me, that's very important, especially being foreign and everything. But that's because my mother told me to say thank you at the end of tennis tournaments. And so I feel like it's so important to remind people that it's not difficult to appreciate people, and it's not difficult to say thank you for what they've created for you. So that's kind of a big one for me. And of course, after that moment, I became more appreciative, and I wanted to make sure more and more that I was telling people how much I appreciated what they were doing for the sport of tennis. I mean, it sort of rolls back to after I realised how much I love the sport and how much I wanted to give back. Every time I said thank you, it became more and more sincere. And so last year, when I was playing some tournaments for fun, I was in Germany, and I went up to the desk at the end. I mean, as always, but this particular story stands out because I went up to the desk and I said, "Hey!" And the girl looked at me and cringed. And I said, "I just want to thank you so much. If it wasn't for you and your organisation, I wouldn't be here playing this tournament. And so I love this sport, and I want to thank you for creating this." And she looked at me and she was like in shock. And this story is just, to me, it was kind of big because she looked at me and said, "What? You're thanking me?" She said, "Not one player has said thank you all week. Not one." She said, "They come in here, and because of course it's a professional tournament, no one's speaking much English. So their broken English is balls, taxi, hotel, practice court. So they come in and bark instructions at this poor woman. And I'm the first person to come in and say thank you." So we actually had a conversation about it, and I said to her, "Look, on behalf of everyone that doesn't yet realise it, or that doesn't know how to say it, or that's too busy worried about their restrings, I want to say thank you, because to me, it's very important that you realise how much you are appreciated." And she was thanking me for thanking her, and we went on for 5 minutes, and it went a bit over the top. But the point is, she clearly appreciated the fact that I took 2 minutes out of my day to go and thank her for organising that tournament. And you never know, maybe I'll go back there in 4 years' time with a player or with something else, and she'll remember me, just like this guy here in Nashville remembered me from 10 years ago. And so now I find myself really looking more and more to how I can make sure people realise that I appreciate what they're doing for the sport. So that's kind of a big lesson, and that's a little bit one of my favourite stories to tell. Now I'm sure that you're all wondering why there's a funny X-ray on my little flyer, or you haven't looked at it, I don't know. Oh, now you're looking. This is important, you've got to go look at that picture. This is an important part of my next story. First of all, I'm going to open up the floor. I want to hear your terrible accidents that have happened on the tennis court. There's got to be some. No? You guys have all led charmed lives with no accidents?
By accident, you mean what?
We've got one.
I was in California playing, and I didn't realize there was a mower behind the court. We were having a lob fest, 14s, you know, grinding it out. And I landed on the mower and then kept playing the point. And then, like, finished the point, went up to serve, and I looked down, my whole leg was red. So
Oh, God.
I got, like, some makeshift stitches, finished the match, won, went to the emergency room, got stitches, and then came back and played another 3-set match and won.
So, how is there a mower on the tennis court? I'm confused.
I know, like, right, it was nationals in California. The mower was on the tennis court. I was so focused, I didn't even see.
Interesting. So what would the moral of the story be there, do you think?
scope out the court before you go.
Your surroundings.
There aren't balls on the baseline, you know, anything.
Look for hazardous objects, right?
Yeah. And a liability for the
Seriously. I mean, normally people might say they trod on a ball and twisted their ankle. That's an impressive story.
It just made a big sound, so like it sounded dramatic. And
Yeah.
everything.
Wow. Okay. No one else has had any major injuries on the court?
It's
Silly
not a
accident.
major
After
injury,
that.
but I shanked a volley and it went off my eyebrow here and I had to get a couple stitches.
Okay. Well, I guess the moral of the story there is hit the ball on the string.
Like, don't take your eye off it, don't look.
Well, yeah.
I slid on a court in Taiwan on a clay court and ripped up about half the bottom of my leg, and about a day later it was an infection and turned out I had a flesh-eating bacteria in it. Swore up about from the knee down. Pretty good.
Wow. So what was that, bad quality court? Or
No idea.
was that just your fault?
When I got back to America, they gave me all kind of antibiotics and stuff.
Wow. Okay, well then, my story's a good one. Because you can use this when you're teaching your little kids. And you can even take the picture home and share it with them if you like. Because I know we all have this problem with kids when they line up. They line up too close to each other. And you always think that someone's going to get hit in the face. Well, this smile is the result of a racket in the face. So when I was 10, I wasn't actually playing tennis, I was playing squash because I didn't have indoor courts, so I played squash in the winters. And for those of you that don't know squash, it's kind of like racquetball, because a lot of people down here don't play squash. Anyway, so you've got a bunch of kids in a very small concrete box with rackets and balls. It's actually quite dangerous if you think about it. And so little 10-year-old me is lining up to hit my forehand, or whatever they call it in squash. And this little 10-year-old boy is like, ha ha, I'll show this little girl, and jumps out in front of me. And he swings back, and I'm focused on the ball, as you should be, right? Tennis ball coming, squash ball coming at me, here we go. Suddenly, I'm aware of a racket coming back at high speed right towards my neck, right here. And my reflexes kick in, and I probably went like this, ah, which is probably a really good thing, actually, if you think about it. And I dropped to the ground at high speed, and it couldn't have been more perfect. The racket hit me square on the front teeth. I didn't get cut, I didn't get bruised, I didn't lose an eye, I don't have a Harry Potter scar, nothing. Just no 50% of one tooth and 60% of the other. Completely shattered into little pieces. They were not to be saved. Like, I still actually have pieces, but there's nothing you can do with them. So I looked a little bit like I came from, you know, backwards Tennessee for a couple of days until I went to a dentist. And the dentist said, how come you're not in any pain? I said, oh. He said there were nerves exposed and everything. And he built up my teeth, so the solid white part you can see is the fake part. And he said, all right, so you've got about 5 years with that. It's going to start to discolor and crumble, and oh my gosh, I tell you what, I've had so many teeth nightmares throughout my life, it's ridiculous. I have these horrible. Anyway, we won't get into that. So that was 21 years ago, and they have not discolored, they have not crumbled, and they're still in place. But if I have a bunch of kids lined up at the back of the court, and they're all too close to each other, they always are, and I say, if it's not your go, back on the fence. If it's not your go, back. Okay, after about 5 minutes of saying that over and over, and they're just starting to get to me. I bring them in and I say, look, because if you look really close, you can see the lines. And they all go, ooh, and then they stay against the fence. And if you want, show them that picture, tell them it's a true story, and you can lose your front teeth playing tennis. So, I was thinking while I was putting together this presentation about the things I've learned, what on earth am I going to talk about for a conclusion? Because actually I don't have a conclusion. I'm just starting. My business has only been around for a year. I'm learning all of this stuff as I go. I don't have a conclusion. All I can tell you is that my father once said to me, if you don't cast the next line, you won't catch another fish. I think I said that backwards. You won't catch another fish unless you cast the next line. You get the idea. The point is, keep trying, keep going. Keep looking for new opportunities. Keep trying to figure out what's next for you, whether it's you personally, whether it's your business, whatever it is you've created, whatever it is you're doing, keep looking for the next opportunity. Figure out what you're going to do. And if I can bring this back around full circle to the little 6-year-old that had a racket who was going to win Wimbledon, if I hadn't had that goal age 6, I wouldn't be here today. And if at age 18 I hadn't decided that maybe that was a little bit far-fetched, but hey, top 100 wasn't that far off, I might have never got to 451. I might have said, oh, 1,000 will do, and by the time I got to 900, I might have thought, oh, well, that's good, I've achieved my goal. So I'm a big believer in aim for the moon, and if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And that's what I'm in the process of trying to do. Not quite sure how I'm going to get there yet, not quite sure where I'm going to go, but I'm going to keep aiming high. I'm going to keep aiming to win Wimbledon with whatever it is I'm trying to achieve, because I believe that I can do good things. I believe I can have fun with this. I believe that we can make a difference in the world of tennis. I believe I can spread the passion. I believe that there may be one other little 6-year-old out there like me running around, and if I can just find her and help her to love the sport the way I am, I'll help her to have a fun life like the life I'm having right now. Maybe just 1, maybe 2, maybe 5. But anyone I can help to love the sport the way I do is giving back to the sport that's given me so much. And so really my conclusion is that I'm just going to keep aiming high. And that's kind of it, really.